So one of the things just to mention, Alex, is that we record these Zoom allies and appetizers for our basically our educational resource library. And so one of the things that we're doing is just this year we'll continue to fine tune that. We've got an individual on our team now that can help us with the digital transfer and putting it on our YouTube channel and just making this kind of information, more easily accessible. So
cool.
Yeah. Well, we're got about a minute left, so we're getting there.
Hey, George.
Hey, Deb.
How are you?
Good, good, good. We're going to get started here in just a minute.
Okay.
So for anybody that's on the call, I'm just going to start out with a couple of housekeeping things. We're going to, as we go through this, through the event tonight, we ask that you mute your mics. We'd love to see your faces if you feel so inclined, but please mute your mic until the end of the conversation. We've got a set pattern of things that we like to do, and I know sometimes we forget to mute the mic, but we will certainly provide time towards the end of the conversation for people to ask questions. We certainly want you to be able to lean in and participate in the experience with things that are moving you and information that you would like to obtain and understand a little better. We certainly believe in that wholeheartedly, and that's certainly one of our focuses with Peculiar and the things that we're doing. So we'll go ahead and get started here. If people are coming on, it's pretty normal, so we'll just continue to kind of flow with that. We're thrilled to have our special guest tonight is Alex Florence, and we're going to hear from him in just a moment. And I want to just kind of talk a little bit. It's important to refresh, who we are and what we're doing. So I'll share a couple of thoughts. Paul, please feel free to add anything that I might miss. Ultimately, Peculiar is a resource development organization, and we recognize that most of us in this space between family and faith and LGBTQ, that we often do not have the resources to understand how best to receive and love and most importantly, unconditionally love our LGBTQ children and individuals. And Peculiar was really spawned from the experience that my wife, Allison, and I had as parents of our son when he came out at 13 and just trying to grasp for resources and constantly looking for ways to understand how best to love our son as he shared with us things that we didn't completely understand and wanted ways to be able to love him in the best of possible ways, and they just didn't exist. And in many ways, we're in that same scenario today. And so our focus is to help build that bridge. Peculiar completely rejects the idea that you have to choose your faith over your child. We believe very strongly that your child should come first, but we also believe that if you do lean into the principles of your faith, that you can learn how to love your LGBTQ child and recognize the significance of that. And so those are that is who we are. Paul, any additional thoughts?
No, it's great, George.
Okay, so to give you the format a little bit, obviously Alex Florence is our special guest, and we're very grateful to have him for a variety of reasons. I've known Alex for a number of years. He's been a very significant part of my journey in opening up my heart to greater understanding of this critical relationship in my own life with my own gay son and with the community at large. A beautiful, beautiful individual with a wonderful story. And I hope that his story will affect you as much as it's affected me. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear from Alex to share his story. And then Paul will moderate some questions to open up his story and to help more deepen our connection to him and appreciating who he is and opening up some understanding here. And then we'll take some time towards the end to open up for some questions from those that are in attendance. So Alex, thank you again. And thank you to each of you for being a part of this. We appreciate and recognize that it's a community that makes this work. And so thank you all for being a part of this and helping help us get to where we need to be so we can have better outcomes for our LGBT community. So thank you.
Thanks, George.
Right, Alex,
Welcome, everybody. What's that, George? Sorry.
No, I just was telling Alex we're ready to listen to his story. That's
going to be great. Yeah. So first of all, again, welcome everyone that's able to join us today on the Zoom. I just put in the chat the study guide. This is something that we're really excited about, in addition to having a great guest like Alex tonight. The idea that we're going to be having these monthly themes and there are links in the chat from the study guide. And you can direct message or text or anything to Susie or myself if you need the actual guide as well. Alex, so thank you for joining us. We kind of want to hear your, like I was talking before, and we always say kind of the Marvel Comics origin story, like what planet are you from and where did you get your superpower, I suppose. If you'll give us just kind of your story a little bit, the top level, or whatever you want to share.
Cool. So I'm from planet Earth. But when I initially got here, I fell into Mexico, and that was where I was born. Back in the 1970s, there were some lawyers that had side gigs of bringing children up from Mexico, and I ended up being one of those kids. So I was purchased for $3,000 and a color TV at the time. And I think it took about 2 months to get me to Utah. I was brought up, I was brought through up to the US by a polygamous family, because who's going to question another child, with a family as large as a lot of the polygamous families are. So I got up to Utah and was placed with a very Mormon family. I grew up with another sibling, my brother. My parents seemed pretty jazzed that they had a son and a daughter at the time. So, grew up LDS. I would say that I was pretty Molly Mormon. I read my scriptures, did all of that good stuff. And very early on, I knew that I felt different. I felt different in my body. I didn't understand a lot of the, I guess, roles that were being placed on me gender-wise. But being kind of that dutiful daughter, I did what I needed to do to please my parents, to please my culture, the religion that I was within, but always fighting this feeling of just not feeling like I was in the right place within myself. And on top of that, also growing up among a lot of very Caucasian society within Layton, Utah, my brother and I were the only kids that were Hispanic or Mexican. And so I already kind of felt a little bit on the outside with that. And then everything that I was dealing with internally, got into junior high, and junior high is not fun for anybody. And all of a sudden I was just even more thrust into feeling so disconnected to my body and disconnected to everything within my soul. But I threw myself into my church and things like that to just bury all of that deep down inside, until I realized I also I was attracted to girls, and that was just another layer that I had to try and figure out. So I buried that as well. And high school came, and I dated. I had a pretty steady boyfriend for a while, who I ended up sending on a mission. And graduated high school. He came home from his mission, and by that time I was like, well, I definitely know I like girls. And I had tried to Dear John him, I think 4 or 5 times, and just didn't really work out. I just don't think he understood what I was trying to say to him, but I didn't understand either. So he came home and immediately asked for my hand in marriage. And that night that he was, my mom said, hey, you know what, he's going to do this and you better say yes, because the only way you can move out of this house is if you get married, you go on a mission, or you leave on bad terms. And I was like, okay, well, I want to get out of this house. So he asked me to marry him, and I responded like, okay, like literally just like, all right, I guess. And was
Alex, sorry.
Yeah.
I think what you just said, that your mom's kind of list, if you don't mind me, can you repeat that for the audience again?
Yes. So she basically said that I either had to get married, go on a mission, or leave on bad terms.
So that was the family situation for you.
Yeah, the family situation was, I needed to make the family and be viewed as like the perfect daughter, the perfect child. I needed to do everything that what society and Mormonism placed upon me to make her look good. That's kind of where it stood.
Do you think that was a combination of appearances and faith, or what do you think that was motivating for her?
I think it was a little bit of both. It was appearances, but it was also what she really believed in. To have an eternal family, everybody needs to be married, and married in the temple. If you're, a son, you go on a mission. As a daughter, you get married. She wanted me to have a whole bunch of grandkids for her. And that just was not something that I even had on my radar that I wanted to do. I always knew at a very, very young age that I did not want to actually birth children. I didn't understand why at the time, but it was just something that I never really thought of would be part of my life. So
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you that step in answer. So here you are, you've been given this ultimatum, and you're meeting up with this return missionary, and you're how old?
I was almost 20. It was the week of my 20th birthday.
Okay, all right. Okay, catch us up.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So he asks me, and I'm like, okay. And I was terribly embarrassed that I was now getting married. And all I could think of was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? How am I going to continue to mask and pretend to be something that I am not? On a lot of levels, on the level of being who I'm attracted to, on the level of really not connecting with my body, and how am I going to try and connect with another human in a marriage? And so, we were engaged through the month of December, and that January came, And I had fallen into a really, really dark place of I just need to get out of this. And how am I going to get out of this? And at the time, my grandma had gone into the hospital, and she had and got out of the hospital, and she was living with us, and we were taking care of her. And there was it was January 9th, I believe, that, oh, it's actually, wow, today's January 9th, because it was the day before my brother's birthday. I had stayed home from church to take care of my grandma, and I was laying in my bed, and I was thinking, there's enough medication upstairs that if I took it, I might not wake up. And at least that's the way I can get out of this, because if I am honest with my family, they will stop loving me. I can't tell them what I'm feeling, and I certainly don't know how to break this engagement off with this boyfriend or this fiance of mine. I was very fortunate in the fact that that day I got a phone call, and my friend just was like, "Hey, I'm headed to your house." I was like, "That's really random because I'm not supposed to do anything on Sunday anyways." But she came down and ended up taking me to just a meeting that she wanted to go to, and it kind of jarred me a little bit out of my thinking, thankfully. But I ended up telling her how I was feeling. And so that night I called up my fiance and I said, "Listen, I can't get married. I can't do this." And he was like, "Well, no, let me go to the temple and pray about this. And I will let you know if this is what we're supposed to do." And I was like, "Okay, whatever." So he did, and he's like, "Yeah, we're not supposed to be engaged." I'm like, "Great, awesome." So fast forward to 6 months later, my mom, I'm still living at home, and my mom is like kind of rousing me about, "Well, you should be getting married this month." And I was like, "Yeah, well, I don't think it's in my cards." And she's like, "Well, why don't you think it is?" And I was like, "I just don't think it is. And she's like, "What, are you trying to tell me that you're a lesbian?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I am." And she screamed at me, and she told me that she hoped that I would get AIDS and die, and to leave the house immediately. And so I did. I left for a few hours. I didn't know what to do. I came home. My dad had come home. She had called all of my family, called my dad home from work. My dad was home when I pulled in the driveway, and I just cried and I said, "Dad, I'm really sorry." And he's like, "I kind of knew." And I was like, "You did? Like, you knew?" And he's like, "Well, yeah. I mean, I watched how you interacted with the other girls, and I kind of found that you kind of flirted with them." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I wish you had told me, because that was news to me. I didn't know I was doing that." So I ended up moving out finally, and as
Sorry,
as I
sorry, that's a key thing. So your dad was supportive of that. Would you say that's supportive, or?
I would say he was supportive in the way he knew how to be. I mean, my dad is much older. He's currently 91 years old. So at that time he was 70, in the 70s probably. Um, and yeah, it was his way of like acknowledging, like, I noticed, and I was very grateful for that, because from that day on he has been my biggest ally in my life, family wise.
Wow.
We've had our bumps here and there. Mostly as I got into my 20s, I ended up starting to work for him, and I started to be more expressive in how I felt on the outside in the way I dressed. So I was dressing, a little bit more what I considered boyish, at the time, and he really struggled with that. And the more I got into the community, and I started doing drag in my early 20s as a drag king, and that was like my outlet for the other layer that I had been burying for so long. So I was a drag king for, oh gosh, for a long time, and every weekend that I would get out of drag, I would just get depressed, like, "Oh, I don't even want to look like this." Like, my everyday looked so different than how I felt in my weekend look. And and it just increasingly became harder to bury all of that. So I was about 30, my 30th birthday. I remember just being really sad, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm getting so old. And how am I going to grow old in this body? Like how am I going to do this? And I was very fortunate at the time to have a partner that was a lot more open to gender expression. And so I told her, like, hey, I feel like I'm a guy, and I don't know what that means right now, but I want you to know. She was very supportive, like, well, we'll figure it out, you know. And sure enough, we started down that road right after my 30th birthday. Um, and I started researching and Googling what it meant to feel the gender that I was not born as, or the sex that I was assigned. And at that time, there was not a lot of positive information out there. It was all pretty sad and pretty horrific, and just not positive at all. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like I own a home and I have a job, and I'm going to lose all of this if I try and align myself with how I feel. And I agonized and agonized for months and months over it. And I finally, it was Halloween night. I had stayed up all night watching YouTube videos and just researching, like, what can I do to try and relieve some of this? And I found one of my friends had reached out and said, hey, we haven't talked for a while, but I've been feeling this way. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have been too. And he told me about a doctor up at the University of Utah who would do top surgery. So a double mastectomy, basically, and kind of a chest reconstruction. And so that next day I thought, I'm just going to call. He said that it could be months, but at least I'll have months to make sure that this is what I want to do. So I called, and they said, you know what? We had somebody just canceled. Can you come in 3 days? And I was like, oh, snap. Yes, I can. I sure can. And that was the beginning of my journey to transition into who I am today. And it started in December of 2011. I got top surgery. And then from top surgery, I decided to take testosterone. I kind of had a little bit of a hang up on that because I wasn't really sure what was going to happen when I started taking testosterone. I was very worried that I would Hulk out, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I really wanted to make sure that that's what I wanted or what I could handle. And I was really into Glee at the time. And there was one episode that kind of really helped me say, okay, I can take that jump. I can make that leap and start testosterone and start another portion of progression of Alex. And in the meantime, like I had, I've been working for the federal government as a contractor up at Hill Air Force Base. And I wasn't really sure how that was going to look because, up there sometimes you have to have security clearances and you have to have certain IDs. And I just didn't know what that was going to look like for me. And so once I started testosterone, I was like, well, I'm going to go through a second puberty here. So people are probably going to notice, like, my voice is going to change and I'm going to get facial hair. And so I went to my bosses and I said, listen, this is what's happening. I'm transitioning into a man, and I would really like it if you would call me Alex from now on. And I was met with a very positive response of, what can we do to help? And so they basically just made it very ID wise and like my security clearance wise, they made it very easy for me, which I was very grateful. And from what I understand, I was the first person at Hill Air Force Base as an employee up there to transition. So they kind of had to figure out how that was all going to look for me and for the federal government up there, which we had our hiccups, but we figured it out. And yeah, I mean, I could go on really through this whole story, but
I thank you. I we'll come back to some things that have happened more recently, and thank you for that share. It's incredible. A couple of things that stand out to me are you sort of kind of were met with sort of parameters or guardrails early on, as many queer people are, but it felt like you had sort of the choices kind of taken away from you a little bit, with whether it was a faith system, a mom that was giving you these ultimatums, obviously I think an environment, in the school system, most likely in Utah, you probably didn't get a lot of information about what it meant to be trans or anything like that. And yet you still kind of persevered. And the idea that you had this gut about who you were at an early age and were still able to go through that's really strong. And I applaud that strength, because and again, and as Alex and I have talked previously, the trans experience is not this cisgendered upper middle class Caucasian gay man's experience. And it's a privilege that the T shows up in our grouping, and I'm grateful to be family with you. But I think that the very reality of what that meant as early as, how old do you think?
I remember being like 3 years old thinking something doesn't feel right to me. Like,
And so-
I'm in a dress and I feel really awkward being in this, and everybody says I'm pretty and everybody says all of this, and I don't feel like that. I feel terrible in what I'm wearing.
And so you had that, okay, so you're 30, from 3 to 30, a journey of really showing up in such a majorly courageous way. The fact that you expressed maybe some suicidal thoughts, but you were strong enough to kind of withstand that and to get through that. That's incredible. Also, I think with most queer people, when we come out, we are met with some great sadness, obviously, for people that are not supportive. But how cool that you had a work environment. Sounds like your dad was trying, that you had some highlights. What are some other people that were there for you during this kind of period?
So definitely, yeah, my dad was. My work, my coworkers were quite amazing. They were there, and they were very supportive when I was changing my name, and they would slip up here and there, and so we kind of made it into kind of like well, you slip up on my name, you have to buy me a Diet Coke. And I got a lot of free Diet Coke for at least a year and a half, and it was totally worth it. But I wanted them to feel like, understand, like, hey, I'm going through a huge transition, like emotionally, mentally, physically, but you're going through this transition with me as well, right? Because they've known me as well, and just so you all know, I'm good with my name, my birth name, so I might reference that here and there, but they knew me as Heather, and they knew this name. And even though I transitioned into and started using Alex as a name, didn't necessarily mean the person that I was not still there, if that makes sense. Like, all of the compassion and empathy and all these wonderful characteristics that I learned as growing up and being socialized as a female were still going to be embodied within who Alex is and who I am. And they just had to, get used to certain social things, like I did. I was very fortunate also to have some of my oldest, dearest friends from elementary still be by my side through all of this, which is very important for me to have people in my life that hold my past with me. Because people who I meet now don't necessarily know all parts of me. I do my best to explain all of that when the time is right, but it means something very special to me to have those friendships that knew me when I was 5 years old, that knew me when I was 10 years old, still be with me.
That's
family
incredible.
wise,
That's incredible.
yeah, family wise, one of the really cool things is my dad, so my uncle on my dad's side, uh, he got married to a wonderful woman when I was 12. And when I was 25, 26, she actually took my dad aside and said, listen, I think I know how your child is feeling, because my dad was kind of giving me a lot of grief about how I was showing up socially, like how I, expressed how I was feeling, how I dressed, and things like that. And so she took him aside and said, "Listen, this is a possibility that your child is going to transition, into a man." And I didn't find out till later on. The reason that she knew about this was that her father actually transitioned in like the 40s. So the person I had met as her father was actually the person that gave birth to my aunt. So,
Wow.
and that was in the 40s. So my Aunt D was like my biggest cheerleader, and it meant so much that there was that history I didn't even know about until I was in my 20s, that was there and ended up helping me start to feel more comfortable about doing what I needed to do for myself. So those were my biggest cheerleaders at the time.
That's great. I think that's again, sometimes it comes in corners that you're not expecting it from, but certainly so welcome when you have that support.
Yeah.
You mentioned sort of, I think your generosity of spirit is laudable, and thank you, Alex, honestly, because for those of us that get pronouns and terminologies and how to say, a trans male versus trans female and all the things we're all learning. And so thank you for your generosity and your patience. You mentioned sort of a funny thing about the Diet Coke. And again, we talked previously, but the idea that I think sometimes people get too nervous, and especially as we're talking to a lot of amazing allies tonight and who'll be listening to this later, I said, maybe there's a fear of knowing what to say. And it sounds like your colleagues, at least, and certainly some of your family members were were able to say, okay, well, we're just going to muddle through this. Can you give us maybe some funny anecdotes, or is there something that a well-intentioned person got wrong and that you showed up and that kind of conversation helped out to further some light and knowledge, if you will?
Yeah, so I mean, the 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 biggest thing was the name change, right? And so that was very hard on a lot of people, as well as pronouns. And um the name thing, the whole Diet Coke thing really worked at work. I didn't necessarily do that with my other friends outside, or my family, but it just was a conversation like, oh hey, can you say he, or hey, can you call me Alex? And I wanted to, it was very important to me to create a safe space, because just as much as I needed a safe space, I knew that my friends and my family needed that safe space to make mistakes. Because even in my own transition, like even now, I make mistakes when it comes to all of the new information that's out there for trans individuals. Like I still make mistakes, and I'm within the community. So I can't imagine how it is for allies and for those who really want to be supportive. And um, so I think it's very important to give the compassion and the understanding that you desperately want as well during your own journey. Um, so and like with my dad, bless his soul, like, at that time he's probably 82-ish, when I was like, hey dad, can you start calling me Alex? And he was the most um that man, I don't even know. He blows me away. He got my name right out of everybody all the time, all the time. And I just applaud him for doing that, because you know, I told him the day I told him, he sent an email to his other kids and to some of his relatives and said, hey, you know, I know that you had a cousin or a niece named Heather, but now you have a cousin, an uncle, a nephew named Alex, and this is how it is. And he just set out that precedent just right then and there.
Wow.
And it really meant a lot to me. And I'm very fortunate to have such an ally in my dad. And even my dad gets things wrong here and there when it comes to just an overall LGBTQ situation. But with me, he's done very well. So
That's amazing. Another thing that you've talked about was that with knowing who you are and kind of being the core you-ness, we thought it was great to have you kind of have a conversation with the theme of rebirth and renewal. And so it's an interesting kind of tension there because you're still the same you. There wasn't any soul changing anything. There was certainly some progress and some evolution and some redefinition for sure. But you're still you. You're still Alex Core, and you know, to be able to mention your given name and to be able to say that, that's very, very in touch with who you are. What parts of rebirth or renewal, or kind of as we talk about January and this new year, and what does that mean to you in terms of coming out as a trans man, as Alex, as, you know, the ally to the rest of the queer community, as a husband? Like, what does that mean to you conceptually?
so I looked up the definition of rebirth because I kind of wanted to understand a little bit more. And something that stuck out to me was part of the definition was a renewed existence. And so as Alex and as Heather, I already existed. I was just kind of like renewing who I felt inside and who I knew that I could be, all of me, to find the confidence that I knew was there, to find to be able to, I think a lot of my rebirth and renewal was also to be able to define what my own masculinity meant to me. Because part of what was, for me, that was very difficult, going from female to male, was walking into the male world and seeing some behaviors that just did not align with how I felt. And so rebirth for me was a birth of being able to mash in all the great feminine qualities that I had learned in society and things like that, and mesh them into who Alex was becoming. And to me, that was a renewal of existence for myself and my soul. And and I feel like I do my best to try and show that just in all of my encounters with everybody. Like, you don't have to act within a certain gender, like have certain stereotypical behaviors, like sometimes that are placed on us. You know, I really worried about that. Like, I remember saying to my partner at the time, like, I just want to be seen as Alex. I just want to be Alex. I don't want to be this masculine person or, you know, whatever. I'm just Alex. And what does that look like? And it was just me being able to say, okay, I'm going to define what masculinity and femininity means to me. And this is what it is. And that was, for me, the rebirth of who I am. And you know, every day it's a rebirth of really being conscious of how I act or interact with people. Because, and I don't know if it's because I transitioned, but I am really hyper, I don't know, hypersensitive, I don't know is the word, or hyper focused on how I interact with other females and males. You know, I don't know if that makes sense, but I always want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable, and that the guys that I come in contact with feel comfortable enough to say, hey, you know, I do need to open up about something. Like, they won't feel like I will ridicule them for talking about feelings, because it's such an interesting thing that I learned in the male world, that guys just learn not to talk about their feelings. And I don't, it's such a foreign thing to me. But on the flip side of that, like the women that I come in contact with, I want them to feel comfortable with me, that I'm not like looking at them, or, you know, in a way that's going to make them feel comfortable. They can say, oh, I find kind of like a kindred spirit in Alex. I can feel comfortable and safe with him because I'm not going to objectify other women, because I remember what it feels like to be objectified, and it's horrible. It's terrible. And so I think my rebirth is just having this wonderful ability to see both sides of femininity and masculinity. So
That's amazing. Frankly, that's mind blowing. I'd never thought of, in fact, guys, no matter who you are, we're socialized. I don't think it's nature, but I think it's certainly nurture to not share our feelings. But then to remember and to recall what it was like to be objectified or to be maybe diminished as a woman, we still have that as a societal problem completely. It's a tragedy in our modern world. Wow. It strikes me the question, have you experienced any awkwardness or even worse, prejudice, or and if so, from the what did you do about it within the queer community, within the LGBTQ plus community?
yeah, I have.
Would you mind sharing that with us?
Oh yeah, I'm completely open to that. So initially when I started transitioning, you know, 10 years ago, a lot of my friends in the community, you know, were lesbians, and and when I and a lot of my acquaintances were, you know, lesbian, and so when I told them what I was planning on doing, I did get a lot of pushback at the time. Well, you're gonna, you know, lesbians who are more, you know, masculine, you're going to, everybody's going to think that they're going to want to do what you're doing, or um and it kind of made some of my acquaintances really uncomfortable, the fact that I had been kind of on the boyish side, and now I'm transitioning over to really align my soul with my body. And that was really hard, because it's like, well, I'm just trying to be who I am, just like you're trying to be who you are. And it was kind of jarring to feel that within my own community. Um, and, you know, with a lot of gay men, I wouldn't say they've been mean or anything, but, you know, gay, you know, the guys that have said things to me, it's like, oh, well, you know, I find you attractive, but I know you're really not a guy. It's like, okay, well, maybe you need to check in with you. Like, maybe that's something that's making you feel uncomfortable, because I know who I am, and you're attracted to me because I to you I present as male, and that's cool. I mean, when I was just doing drag, I would have gay men come up to me all the time, like, oh, you're so hot, you know, whatever. And like, okay, well, at that time, you know, I have breasts, you know, so you're probably not going to be cool with that. I don't know. But as I started transitioning, and more gay men, I got some more attention from men. That was what I heard a lot was, well, I know you're really not a man. Or it was, well, I know a secret about you. Do you? Because I would like to know the secret you think is a secret, you know, things like that. So I kind of felt that was a little bit unfortunate, where I feel like there is quite a bit of disconnect of understanding the transgender journey within the gay and lesbian community. So that's kind of what I have experienced.
Yeah, I suspected, I noticed that that's happened to several people that I've known that have been in the community, that, and this is a message I think to our ally friends in the room tonight, that we don't have it figured out. Our world and community it's community by definition and from a social thing, I think, but we've got to work all the time to overcome prejudice for socioeconomic and gender and orientation and race and gender presentation and identity. It's something that we've all got to work on together. And George always likes to say, like, it takes a village, and I think that it takes all of us to try and get better. I think I want to get to some questions, but I think my final question is, and just to set in my mind, if I'm overstating it, I don't think I am, but here's this kind of superhero, and I mean this with the Marvel planet, whatever, but the idea that you knew that you were who you are at a very young age, and you had all these obstacles, you had these things presented in front of you that may have taken some people out and may have said, I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to be authentic. What still motivates you to go through, again, whether you see I think in the media, we're starting to see better addressing of trans issues and what it means to really be respectful of our trans brothers and sisters. But there's still going to be things during the day or during the week or a typical, kind of environment that might be challenging. What motivates you to keep going? I mean, you've got this kind of, on the face of it, great life and marriage and job and community and a lot of friends and family that support you, but we all have still challenges. What motivates you, and what's the core thing that's taken you through all of these triumphs, Alex?
Well, I guess if I look at it from like maybe a spiritual perspective, I guess.
We're not afraid of spiritual here. That's a good thing.
Okay. If I look at it from that point of view, I was placed on this earth for a reason, right? And and that reason is one, to come in, like, to be able to figure out who I am and continue that journey and really be all that I can be. Part of that, though, I really feel is I wouldn't have gone through everything that I have in my life and not have a reason to be who I am and to be where I am at right now. And so, and you're right, like, on the surface, I have a great job, I have a home, I have a wonderful wife, and but underneath, like, I don't feel like I have it all together all the time by any stretch of the imagination. But what keeps me going is the fact that maybe me just sharing a tidbit of my story might help somebody else. Because when I was trying to research and figure out how to do this, I didn't have a whole lot of positive examples of it. And if I can share my story and be the face that somebody might need to have to feel a little bit of calm and validation, then that is what drives me. That is what says, hey, you being on this earth, this is your passion, this is what you are to do. And I am happy to do that. I am happy to be the face. I am happy to sit down and have people ask me questions or say things to me that may not be they may make mistakes asking me or talking to me, or the verbiage that they're using may not be the most PC, but I am there to help and teach, and that's what drives me, because I don't know, I just feel it so deep inside. I just feel so deep inside that this is what I'm supposed to do. This is who I'm supposed to be. And I just want to help other people, because the more I can talk about my story and my origin story, even though, what I presented today was like, a snippet of it, the more it helps me remember how far I've come.
Sure.
And so I'm continually teaching myself and reminding myself who I am, and in turn I'm helping other people understand those who they might come in contact with, or those who are thinking of transitioning, or they just need a safe space. Hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, it exceeds, frankly. I think all of us want to be seen and to be recognized as who we are authentically, but I think very few of us know a purpose as bold as you've just stated. I think that that's incredible. And it's so amazing to know a spirit. I mean this not in a churchy way, but in a kind of metaphysical, earthy way, I guess, but that we're all kind of bumping along each other and trying to figure it out. And the fact that you have as purpose driven a life and as a strong conviction, I think is really incredible. So certainly that's a vibe that people get from you. Wow, amazing, Alex. Thank you for sharing these. Like I said, a short amount of time, but appreciate your generosity of spirit again. We're gonna turn it to some questions, and those that are on the Zoom, if you wouldn't mind just using the raise your hand feature if you have a comment, and then I'll call on you and we can unmute. I think likely some people I don't know that maybe on the Alex fan list that I see here on the Zoom. So if anyone has any questions or comments for Alex, or raise your hand, or okay, Jerry.
I just want to share an experience I had about a year ago. A close friend of mine, her son had come out to her as being trans, and she had a hard time sorting that out in her head. So I met with her, sat with her, shared as much as I knew, as we all are trying to learn. We had a big cry because she never had she didn't have another adult to talk this through with. And she, as mentioned earlier, that we do get clumsy in pronouns and names. So I gently reminded her and encouraged her to use her daughter's pronoun of her, and to use her preferred name or her new name that she wants to be identified as. And it took a little while in that conversation, and she did apologize and backpedal, but I said, until you're comfortable, you'll just allow me and allow your daughter to correct you and remind you who you're speaking to and who you're speaking of. And that made it easier for her. And then in Calgary, we have the Calgary Pride Committee, who does LGBTQ education for the broad community. They do a lot of networking with the corporate community to encourage inclusion and understanding of our broader community. And it's daytime, weekday, and I sat in on some of those conversations, and it was very uplifting to know that the corporate world is open to this. So then there was another version of this for the general public, and I invited my friend and her husband to this, and they wanted to bring their daughter, but their daughter was still searching to find comfort in being who she is and being comfortable being out in public and learning to be comfortable in presenting. So we understood that, and I reminded her about that it's a journey to be comfortable in your own skin wherever you are on the spectrum. And until then, be patient and be supportive, and do what you can to learn and understand, and try to encourage those within your circle, and especially your family, your parents, your siblings, those that are close to those that are transitioning, or those who are, I'm clumsy in my conversation, in learning their identity and feeling comfortable in their own skin, to help that individual, that child, to become more comfortable. my background 25 years ago was clothing design, and I had offered to help her daughter find how she wanted to present herself. As simple as taking, because again, ready to wear clothing for the transition is not always easy, because by proportion, male bodies are longer and wider. So when you're trying to adapt ready to wear female clothes to fit a former male body, there's lots of challenges. The other option would be to work with that individual and help them self-discover how they want to present themselves, as far as wardrobe and what feels comfortable, being able to test and experiment with different things without making a commitment to a specific style or presentation, and learn how to find that comfort in how you want to present. Because again, it's a journey to discover who you are and how you want to carry yourself and present yourself to those around you that are close to you, and to the broader, bigger community of the general public. So that's been helpful for her. So that's just some thoughts that I had.
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks a lot. Alex, I imagine that finding outfits that were on and just represent Alex, maybe Jerry could offer his services for a stylist, if you will. Jerry, thank you. That would be hard. Another question. I'm going to get let me try it. How pronounce your name? I'm sorry.
It's Sitska.
Sitska, that's gorgeous. Thank you. Hi, how are you?
Thanks for not trying it and slaughtering it.
Well, I figure I'd probably, again, with pronouns and names and all the things I want to learn. So thank you for helping me.
I just had a question for Alex. I was wondering if you could tell us about how you met your wife and how long you've been married.
Oh, yeah, happy to. So I met my wife. I had been asked to present at a Trans 101 up at Sunstone up at the University of Utah. And my wife had traveled with a really dear friend to go to this conference from California. Interestingly enough, she almost didn't go to the conference, and I almost did not go and present either, because I was at work and I didn't know if I could take off, but I at the last minute decided to. So I went, and she's actually on this call. So I went to this conference and sat down, and she and her friend sat behind me, and I had just gotten this tattoo that says "Be You Bravely," and I think I had done this or something, and the friend saw it, grabbed my arm, and was like, "Oh my gosh, I saw that on Facebook." And I was like, turned around, I was like, "Hey, I'm Alex." And yeah, so that's how I met my wife, was through that interaction. And we dated long distance for about, I think, 8 months or more, and then she ended up moving to Utah, and we got married in 2016. So yeah, that's how we met.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments from the group? Let's see from the chat. Curtis asks, how can we help our friends who are struggling with their child who just came out as transgender?
I mean, I think
Thank
kind
you,
of
Curtis.
like, yeah, thank you. I think how to help them. I mean, sit down, listen to them, because, they're trying, they want to do what's best for their child. They want to make sure that their child feels safe. And I think it's just mostly just listening to what they have to say, having understanding and compassion. And I mean, I think if looking back, if I had been able to come out at an earlier age with my parents. I think having resources like another transgender individual talk to my parents or talk to the child would have really, really been helpful. Um, so honestly, like if, I'm always available if anybody, you know, has a child or has parents who would like to talk to somebody who's transitioned. Because I have found that with parents, it's very important for them to kind of see what transition can look like for their child. What could be the possibility for their kid. And to see the positive that can come out of their child transitioning. So I think just kind of having resources and things like that is a very important thing that you can do for friends or friends who have kids that are feeling that they want to come out or figure out their own gender identity. So
Thanks, Alex. Thanks. I have a question from Susie, and then we'll go to Seth. How can we help those in our religious communities to see beyond their orthodox views of gender and be more accepting to those who want to stay with them and are transgender? It's a great question.
Oh, that's a really good question. And honestly, I wish I had a really awesome answer. I mean, gender is, I kind of see gender as a spectrum in a lot of ways. I mean, society has told us how we should be. Our religions have told us how our gender roles can line up, and I just kind of think it's important to have these conversations with those who with transgender individuals, so that I don't know, so that again they can see what a transgender person or looks like. And I don't mean like presenting, but I mean as a person, as a soul. A lot of our prejudice or a lot of things like that stem from fear of the unknown, fear of not knowing what it's going to look like. And I think it's just really important that religious communities open themselves up to just having a conversation with those who may not fit within the gender norms or gender identities that they think that people should fit into. So, but I think that's a question that we're all wondering how we can, bridge that gap with, religious communities. So, and I think that's why we're here too, and that's why Peculiar is here, and that's what the hope is to be able to educate those people in religious communities. So.
I think what's interesting about that with religious communities that perhaps spiritual communities get it right. If I look at some of the indigenous people's sort of beliefs about two spirits, or the I think Pacific Islanders have a convention from their mythology and kind of learnings or traditions that that celebrate and consider sacred these two spirit humans. And I think it's interesting to say that maybe one religion doesn't get it right, but it doesn't mean that spirituality and that connection to a higher power is broken in any way. I think that I'm really grateful for that dialogue. Seth, you had a question.
Hey, yeah, you're getting my Sunday night hair, and I've been in pajamas all day, but it's been a great day. So I'm just wondering, Alex, it sounded like you transitioned a little bit later. I think you kind of started around your mid-30s, but I'm sure that those feelings, or early 30s, sorry, but I'm sure those feelings were much earlier. And so my question for you is, I've got two of my kids who are 17 and 13, both have friends who identify as trans. And I guess my question for you is, how can they be supported? They're very affirming, but what is helpful and what's not helpful? And and if you could go back to your teenage self, what would you want?
I mean, if I could go back to my teenage self, what would be helpful is, I remember in junior high writing in my notebook and writing the name Alex, because that's what I wanted to be called. I didn't want to be called Heather at the time. So having my friends, call me Alex, or having them, call me he and him would have been extremely helpful. Even saying, hey, if we're going to go shopping, like if we went shopping or whatever, helping me pick out clothes, because heaven knows I probably did not have any fashion sense at that point in my life, and I still struggle a little bit now. But like being with me and being part of that journey is really important. I mean, they're affirming. That's what's needed, is being affirming, and being able, like, I know that there, even in my 30s, transitioning, there were times where I was too scared to stand up for myself. Somebody, using the wrong pronoun, and for some reason I just couldn't bring myself to saying, hey, I need this pronoun, and having a friend step up and say, you know what, you need to call him he. That was so important, because there's not, I can't be strong all the time. It takes a lot, especially in the early stages of your transition or figuring it out. There are days that you just want somebody to stand in and say, hey, let me take that bullet for you. I need to remind you, that they go by he or she, or their name is this. So, whatever your kids are doing, I applaud them, because they're hard. Like, kids are mean, they can be very mean. So I think just doing that is a very important aspect. Standing up for them, honoring their pronouns and their name, their chosen name, and just being very excited for their journey. It's very important. So
Thank
Great,
you. That's
great question. Allison asks, how would you coach parents of teens to move along the journey of transition? So many parents may not think the time is right, or if their child really knows. I think this is a big question. I certainly see this in our local community here in Utah, that a lot of the parents are still questioning, like, is this the right time? They want to be supportive, they want to be helpful, but could you speak to that question from Allison about timing and that with parents?
yeah, so I think where parents sometimes get caught up is when they hear like medical transition, right? Like, my kid wants testosterone, my kid wants estrogen, and luckily, like, kids can get blockers, and I'm not a doctor, so but kids can have blockers, and as a teenager, I would have loved to somebody say to me, here, I'm going to put you on hormone blockers, so you're not going to really develop. And and from there, socially, how do you want to present? How do you want to dress? What makes you feel comfortable, as comfortable as you can be in your skin, and with clothing and with hairstyle and things like that. So I think it's really important for parents to kind of step back from being worried of medically and really focus on social transition of how their kids want to present, how their kids want to be addressed, name wise and pronoun wise. I think those are very important, and those are, in my mind, those are very doable. That's a very doable thing to support your kid who, who says, hey, I really want to wear a dress to school. Great. Let's go get you one. And, or whatever. So I think it's just really important that parents, look at it from a social standpoint more so than a medical standpoint at the time. And yes, that's going to come, the medical portion of it will be a conversation and needs to be a conversation, and parents need to be educated about that. But it doesn't necessarily mean it has to happen right then and there, the moment the child says, hey, I feel this way, I feel male, I feel female, I feel that, non-binary, I feel, whatever. Like, medical does not have to come into that conversation. So I think it's just really, what's that?
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I just think social wise, it's just very important. Social transition is very important for kids.
I think that's a really critical marker, because what you just said is really important. There's a lot of fake news going around about, the one person that had a testimony that wanted to reverse a particular surgery or whatever, and that becomes a lightning rod and a talking point on the far right. I've certainly heard those tropes and that misinformation. So one of the ways, what I think that you just said was really interesting, is to focus on that social transition and focus on that in the very highly unlikely event that that child does not want to continue along that journey. They can make that decision later. And I think to answer that question for Allison, that was perfect, because the focus on, being supportive of your child, a spring dress might look kind of incredible. It might need to be an extra, extra, extra large. But the idea that that comes as not to replace the conversation on medical. I'm going to go ahead really quickly and talk about your surgery, and then we're going to come back to Deb's, and then BJ's question at the end. But Heather asks you, Alex, you mentioned the top surgery became available much sooner than you'd expected. Did you have any regrets ever with regarding the timing?
Oh no, not at all. Like, it was actually, I felt very fortunate that it happened as quickly as it did. From the time I got my appointment to the time of surgery was less than a month. And really that emotionally and mentally, having that surgery helped me so much, because I just never felt connected to what was up here. And it was almost kind of like it was not part of my body, and it was hard to hide. It was just a struggle to wake up every day and see that portion of me. And so no, I don't have any regrets whatsoever. It was perfect timing for it. So yeah.
Thanks for that, Alex. Deb's question is to everyone but here on the chat. Thank you, Alex, for all you do to educate others on so many levels. She had the amazing experience of meeting you for the first time with her mother, who is a very active member of the Mormon faith. Can you tell us what your main approach was when you start a conversation, when you know the person is limited in their knowledge of the trans community? Because, as she says, you were brilliant with her mom, which is great. That's a great question. I think a lot of people is, you may be the first trans person that someone knows, actively knows. How do you start that conversation? And when you're going to be you're the thought leader, you're the first person on the moon, if you will, for those people.
So Deb, I love you, by the way, and thank you. I'm really trying to remember back when I first met you, like how we started talking with your mom. But I feel like when I start the conversation with somebody, it's kind of, I ease into it. and I try to put myself in their shoes, of how they might be hearing what I'm saying. And I want to make it kind of lighthearted, and this is just a story. This is just part of who I am. And I think sometimes the energy that you put out when talking about your story or talking about who you are really helps people feel comfortable, opening their heart up a little bit, to hear what you have to say. And so, yeah, I think my approach is just, it's just the Alex approach. I don't know how to word it. I just try to be very thoughtful in communicating my story to people, and because I just desperately want them to feel comfortable, just like I want to feel comfortable too. So I don't know if that answered it, but
Alex, you're making all the rest of the guys feel a little like you've got the full package to be sensitive and to be able to roll masculine and to roll, like, you've got the full story there. I'm looking at George going, oh shit.
I'm taking copious notes here.
I know
I got some work to do.
Yeah, things to work on for sure. Thank you. Okay, BJ, you had a question.
Actually, I just wanted to weigh in on what kind of the standards are for taking care of our kids when they come out. So basically a kid from the age of 3, maybe when Alex felt the way that he did up until puberty. As Alex has stated, really the only option for these kids is to socially transition. And that's to, experiment with hair and clothes and name and pronouns. During that time, parents need to start assembling a team to really assess their child. So a mental health professional, hopefully one who's trained in gender issues, a medical professional who's experienced with this. University of Utah has some great resources and medical professionals there that can help with this. And what these people are going to be looking for is an insistence, persistence, and consistency with these kids. Does it change over time, or are they over the next several years going to insist and persist and consist, or be insistent on who they are as being different from their sex assigned at birth? That starts to really lay a background that will lead to a diagnosis of gender dysphoria or transgender. Kids who are diagnosed with gender dysphoria very, very rarely desist or change their minds. That's one of the big fallacies that we see all of our politicians weigh in on is we're protecting these kids from changing their mind and doing harm to themselves. Kids who are diagnosed, less than 2% change their mind and desist and return to the gender they were assigned at birth. Hopefully then around the age of puberty, just maybe slightly before puberty, as they've met criteria that are well established between the medical and mental health professionals, they may be allowed to start on puberty blockers. To be able to help our kids from going through the wrong puberty can really be life-saving. It can also be very beneficial as to helping them have changes that are very hard to make in the future. A male body, someone that's been testosteronized over a course of time is very hard to get rid of some of those male traits and vice versa. So again, the puberty blockers just stop puberty. They allow a child to continue to show insistence and persistence and consistent. Down the road, another 2 or 3 years, they may be allowed to start on estrogen therapies or a testosterone therapy. But those blockers do no harm at all. They just stop puberty. Your politicians will say that they are chemically castrating kids, which is not the case. That just doesn't happen. They've been used for decades to stop precocious puberty in young girls, and are very safe drugs. Testosterone and estrogen do have some permanent side effects, but again, they can be very life-saving when administered to kids, teenagers who are seeking to go through the puberty that connects with who they feel that they are. So just like I said, I just wanted to weigh in on that. And those are basic steps that all the medical doctors and mental health professionals are very much in agreement on. And we need to pay attention to our kids, believe them, because they know who they are, and they're not changing their minds. So
thanks, BJ. That's great information. I appreciate you clarifying. One of our goals here with Peculiar is to make sure that we're giving that accurate information. And George and we talked about publicly telling this group so that we're held accountable, that we are going to be doing a new website and with links to resources, just like you spoke of, BJ. And I think something that just struck my mind is factual definitions and real information about what some of those things do and don't do, from known sources and medical experts and mental health experts. Thank you for that insight.
Hey, Paul,
Um,
before we go, there is additional question from Robin.
I was just gonna get to that. Sorry.
Perfect.
Yeah, that was gonna wrap it up with that. First of all, thank you for everyone. We have this final question. Robin says she has a friend whose son has recently transitioned from male to female. Her friend has worked hard to use the right pronouns and be very supportive of her daughter, but the daughter is struggling with thoughts of suicide. What help could you give her to help get through these thoughts and be at peace with their transition? How can you let them know that the journey will get better and it won't always be as hard as it is now?
Well, that's a heavy question. Well, I mean, I can say, it gets better. I can say that it does. And there's days that is better and there's days that it's really hard. And part of transition is accepting yourself and what's going on within you. I'm going to be honest. I wish I had a really great answer to this question, or some life altering words of encouragement. I think that, I mean, your child needs to, I mean, I would hope that your child feels a purpose, and their purpose for themselves is to be everything that they know that they can be. And at some point, they will be able to look back at those really, really hard times and talk to somebody and help somebody that is trying to align with how they feel, whether that is coming out as gay or coming out as non-binary or transgender. And that it feeling confused, feeling alone, feeling sad, feeling depression while going through transition, I believe is completely normal. And if they are feeling shame for feeling that while trying to get to their authentic self, for feeling sad and things like that, there's no shame in feeling depressed and sad and like, what the hell am I doing? Because I can't tell you how many times I thought, what the hell am I doing as I was transitioning? And how many times I was in a deep, deep, dark cave of sadness, because what if what I'm doing is never going to align? And I needed to, I did, and I luckily was, going to counseling. And I think for me, I think I had a little bit of adult maturity on my side of realizing that I'm not doing this for anybody else other than myself at the time. And that kind of I was able to refocus on what the purpose, because I felt during the first parts of my transition, it was a very selfish time. I was doing something just for me. And I felt guilt and I felt shame about that. And I felt like, oh, I'm messing up everybody else's life. And, and at the end of the day, no, I was improving my life. And down the road, hopefully helping other people feel safe and seen. So, your child feeling suicidal thoughts, and, I would just tell them that, I mean, this dark time really starts to get lighter. And transition isn't an event, it's a process, and it's a long one. And I don't claim to be through my transition now. I continually am in this journey every day. And I don't know if it would help if I talk to your child or not, but I would be happy to sit down and talk to your child and see if I could help them in any way. And I'm sorry that I don't have a better answer for you. Very sorry.
Thanks, Alex. Robin, thank you for that question. I think it was her friend's child, but certainly please forward contact information. Thank you for that generous offer to help out Alex. Allison writes that there's suicide prevention training that you can take, and that a lot of us have those resources. So I would say to Robin, please put your friend in touch with any of us, the Pride Center, Encircle, even Equality Utah, and the HRC chapter here in Salt Lake all have those resources. I know woefully inadequate in some of the public schools, unfortunately. Okay, I think we've got time for Deb. I think our final question. Deb, you've got your hand raised. Maybe still muted.
Oh, am I there?
There you are.
I didn't dare come on because I had just worked out and I didn't want to scare everybody. Alex, first of all, I thought you had a really great response. I'm speaking from, I think that those who know me, I am a therapist and I have worked with the LGBTQ community. And to answer that, well, to hopefully help with that question is to ask the child, what do you think is getting in the way of you feeling your best? It could be something socially, people are making fun of me, or it could be the way I look. It could be when I go in the shower. I hear a lot from kids when they go in the shower that, talk about the body dysmorphic, and they just don't like. So there's so many things. And when we can actually look and talk at what those roadblocks are, then parents can become an advocate with the child to get those roadblocks out of the way. So that would be my suggestion, is always defer to the kid and say, what do you think is getting in the way of you feeling your best? So I hope that helped.
Yeah.
That's great, Deb. Thank you. Gosh, we could go on for a long time. I learned something every time we all get together, and BJ's, kind of comments, and wow, we've had a lot from Jerry and from Deb. Appreciate everyone's weighing in. Alex, thank you again for being a part of this. I wanted to say thanks to Christy for having a little bit of her own story being out there and supporting you and being here on the Zoom tonight. For those who know, I've only met the two of you a couple of times, but to see a cute couple out and about in Salt Lake City is really fun. So it's great to see you both. Quickly, we're going to be doing this on the second Sunday of every month. I am reminded that as butch as I try and act or whatever, that the Super Bowl is on the 13th. And so I'm going to try and understand what that means. Sports ball with ad dollars on it, I guess. I'm kidding.
It means halftime show. That's what it means.
Alex,
Halftime show and commercials.
No, I'm coming out as a gay man who likes American football, and I'm sorry, but I do know what the Super Bowl is. I'm just giving us some birth, but I absolutely like all of those tight pants. But we're going to do that on the 12th. I don't think we want to compete with the Super Bowl, but we'll probably do it the 12th. Is that right, George? We talked about Susie, keep me honest.
Yes.
Okay, great. So we'll be looking for this, and our theme for February is unconditional love, appropriately. We kind of have that on our mind during the month of February. We will be posting the upcoming study guide for the month of February just right before the end of January, so everyone has a time to read up ahead. We'll include pop culture references. I'm a big film buff. Anybody that wants to contribute to the theme, please send me a note, or George or Susie a note. The playlist is up and running. If you want to listen to some good tunes, we've got the premium, so there's no commercials. But let us know if you like the music. Hopefully we've kept all the E's off of all the songs so you can play it with your family. And there's something from a lot of different decades, because that's the kind of music I like. So Curtis is typing one more thing I can see. Yeah, thanks, Curtis. Says thanks for sharing for everybody. Thanks everyone for attending. We'll have this posted. We are going to be, and again, I'm saying this publicly so we can hold ourselves accountable. Hopefully by the end of the first quarter of this year, by the end of March, we'll have our website, we'll have our premium YouTube up, and we'll be able to download all this information and topics. And we will be including, as BJ mentioned, more and more resources with credible support networks and ways that we can help. Again, as Deb was saying, that we can all lift each other up and get to those right answers. Alex, thanks again. Amazing. It was a privilege to have a conversation with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to say too, I appreciate you both reaching out, because it's been a couple of years since I've been able to really say or talk about my story. And in some ways I kind of have lost myself a little bit. And so it's really nice to be able to talk about it and remember. And so I really appreciate this time that you let me have. So thank you.
Well, you might get asked to share it in different formats again. We certainly like having you. So thank you.
Oh, you got it.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Good night.